What's a bad miracle?
Nope is the third film to be directed by the rising horror director Jordan Peele, and follows two siblings running a family business in California that provides horses for stunt work in films, until they discover something wonderful and sinister in the skies above their ranch, in the form of a mysterious, otherworldly phenomenon. Jordan Peele's rise in the horror genre as of late is something that can't be ignored. While I haven't gotten around to seeing his other films, despite wanting to, it's easy to see the impact he's been making with his works like Get Out, and all of his movies so far have been consistent in terms of receiving critical praise. It's clear, despite being a newcomer, he might just be on his way to becoming one of the best directors currently in the business. But as I said, I have not seen his other work, so this review will be coming from someone who is new to Peele's work and has had an interest in seeing his other projects. I'm just going to come around and say it, this film blew me away. Peele's films have been pretty divisive for some, but this one worked nearly perfectly for me. There was clear inspiration taken from other sci-fi and horror directors like Spielberg and M. Night Shyamalan. There are parts of the story that were clearly inspired by Close Encounters, Signs, and even Jaws to an extent. However, it never feels like Peele is trying to rip off these films and directors. Rather, you could tell these works must have had an impact on him, as he did for many film fans and those in the film industry. And he was trying to replicate that same feeling of the classic sci-fi horror genre in a very tributing, respectful way. And I feel he succeeded at that goal, because for most of this film's runtime, this feels completely like a film that will have been released in the late 80s to early 90s. There's a large mystery element to the story and concept presented that has been covered in a large subgenre of film, where the audience discovers more about these supernatural events with the characters the more the film progresses, instead of relying on exposition scenes to move the plot along. Peele takes his time for the majority of the movie setting up these mysteries, and showing how much we have to learn about the unknown in challenging ways, know how to deal with it. Granted, this did cause the film to feel very slow-paced, but that was never a problem with me. There was a constant thrill element in the presentation of the story, and there were rarely any scenes where the viewer could relax and not worry about the fate of these characters. The threat was always consistently high and genuinely creepy at points. What I also love about how Nope handles its horror elements is how it does not bombard the viewers with constant jump scares and gore. Instead, it taps into that fear of the unknown and supernatural that so many of these classic sci-fi films try to create, and there's a ton of very subtle scares throughout the first two acts of the film. And when those jump scares do come, they just felt perfectly timed. You never knew when they were coming, but it's hard to relax because the film makes it seem like something is coming. And by the time they do come, it's at moments when you're not ready for one. There were multiple points in the film where my fear completely jumped, and there were times where I even got startled, and I rarely get startled when watching films. That sense of classic sci-fi and horror is already fantastic as is, but that's not where the great stuff ends. Peele was able to give the film a perfect balance of originality on top of that familiar feeling and stories this subgenre brings. I think the best thing Peele was able to add to this film was a sense of awe and visual spectacle. The cinematography in this film is gorgeous from beginning to end. This film was shot by Hoyte van Hoytema, who worked on cinematography for several Christopher Nolan films, like Tenet, Interstellar, Dunkirk, and the upcoming Oppenheimer, and he shined once again. This is one of those rare instances where I was able to watch a film and had no idea how they shot many of these scenes. Mostly during the nighttime scenes, which I've never seen anything like in any other film. Those scenes looked beautiful, and there was a large scale in terms of setting presented in the film. This film was shot for IMAX, but unfortunately I wasn't able to watch this one in a larger format, but I regret not experiencing this film that way, because even though this film looked great in my theater, I can't imagine how much more gorgeous it would have looked in IMAX. This film also had phenomenal sound design. Power outages are a constant element in the movie, and designer Johnny Byrne outdid himself in these scenes. You could hear the fade-ins and fade-outs of different machinery far off in the distance when they happen, including theme park audio and those inflatable long-arm people, you know, the ones at car dealerships. And it creates a very unsettling feeling because they give off the sense something could be present the audience is not seeing. And Michael Abels had a terrific score to complement the film. Even the CGI in the film is a complete marvel whenever scenes that depend on it happen, and a ton of supernatural designs were loaded with detail and creativity. One more thing Peele did that I think he succeeded at was having that right balance of humor and suspense. Trying to implement humor into a thriller while trying to build suspense is not an easy thing to do without having a clash with the tone, but I think Peele hit the perfect balance and some moments got a good laugh out of me. And just like Peele has been known to do in his other films, Nope is packed with a ton of hidden messages, some of which I might not even pick up on until a couple of rewatches. And Peele leaves a ton of the film up to our interpretation. I feel everyone's going to walk out of this film with their own perspective on the meaning of this film. I think the biggest one I was able to pick up on was the commentary on Hollywood spectacle. Despite this film technically being one, a big part of this movie is exploring how far some will go to take advantage of certain events, some that may even be traumatic to a few individuals, and how people will monetize those events even if there are dangers in doing so. The other message I was able to pick up on allowed the film to connect with me on a more personal level, and it's how this film wants to be a love letter to the crew that works behind the camera on films, and the film makes a point that these people don't seem to get the recognition or credit they fully deserve, even if they make monumental achievements. As someone who has always had interest in working behind the scenes of films and productions, it allowed this film to feel a lot more personal, and I feel I've connected with this film more thanks to that message. Because, as I mentioned, with the cinematography, directing, and sound design, this is one of those rare films where the people working behind the camera are just as important as what's happening on screen. And I think if you have a passion for working behind the scenes or you cite elements of filmography or crew, this film will hit a lot differently. The casting was something else I thought was also done perfectly, which is saying a lot because the cast for this film is fairly small. Keke Palmer was the standout of the film. She has this great sense of energy throughout the film. She is extremely fun whenever her character is on screen. And I remember reading an article once where Peele called Daniel Kaluuya his Robert De Niro, and I felt that when watching the film. He is excellent in this, especially since he's been given a harder role where most of his performance relies on silence and visual expressions, due to his character feeling a lot of pain. His character also has a running gag throughout the film that had my theater laughing hysterically. It was also the most I laughed during the film. Steven Yeun gave another performance that I thought was fantastic. He has a subplot that ties back into the message of traumatic events and how people will view it and will monetize tragedy. And while I got the point of that sequence, it kind of felt like it was from an entirely different film at times. I think there is one problem I have with the characters, and that is they don't get a lot of development despite the amount of focus they get. It doesn't feel like they go through a major change during the film. I can see this problem going away on rewatch, however, because it's not a huge problem for me. I think the fact that they were perfectly cast and performed allowed them to be as likable as they were, to the point where they became enjoyable to watch despite the lack of development. Jordan Peele's Nope is a perfect return to the classic sci-fi horror genre, in the same veins of Shyamalan and Steven Spielberg, but it's also original enough to stand on its own through its execution and direction that Peele presents with its distinct style of filmmaking and storytelling, topping it all off with some gorgeous cinematography and sound editing, creative visuals, great performances from an extremely talented cast, and a perfect blend of suspense and comedy, all contributing to a beautifully made Hollywood spectacle about the dangers of creating that spectacle. Much like Peele's other films, I could see this being a very divisive movie. As I said, everyone's going to have their own perspective of the meaning of this film, but I, for one, loved nearly every minute of this. If you love Peele's style of directing, I have no doubt you will adore this film. I recommend seeing it on the biggest screen you can find, probably IMAX, since this movie was shot using IMAX cameras. I'm giving Jordan Peele's Nope a 9 out of 10. After watching this film, I can safely say I'm more eager to check out Peele's previous films than I ever was, and I'm more excited to see what he's going to do next. So what were your thoughts on Nope? Were there any messages you picked up on that I didn't touch upon in this video? Do you have your own interpretations of it? Did you love the film? Are you excited to see what Peele does next? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you like this review and you want to see more, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and ring that notification bell to be notified for any upcoming reviews.
We're getting a call from my supervisor asking how my service was.
5 stars, Angel, 5 stars.